if tourism is affected here, then it not only hurts Bali majorly, which we saw in COVID, but it really affects Indonesia as a whole.
So it means if you're successful in making a small change here, the impact is exponential.
So yeah, you're either in that camp or you're not. And I think we've already seen businesses go by the wayside because of it. And we've already seen businesses become incredibly successful because of being good citizens, being good corporate citizens. So a future fit organisation is good for the planet, is good for the species, and it pleases the gods, whatever gods you believe in. If your management team are sitting there going, how do we be better? You're going to see more people fall into line behind that. And I don't mean that in the control sense. We'll get behind that, maybe is a better way to put it. That kind of leadership than people who are just like bottom line.
Yeah.
Because that style of hyper capitalism, mega capitalism has had its day. And I think this current generation, this active generation, it is really realising how damaging that has been for our environment. How much we've hurt the planet, how much we've hurt ourselves. Future fit leadership to me is a leader that the kids or the next generation would be proud of. That is really considering the legacy of their actions and their behaviour. And that can be obviously environmental, but social as well. So future fit leadership for me cares holistically around their impact and understands how much impact they do have. And the execs and leadership sometimes don't get that, especially new leaders.
Hey everybody, welcome to Future Fit with Friska. And today we're going to debate about the topic, are future fit organizations sustainable organizations, right? And with me is no better person to talk about this with than Tobias Wilson. So he's traversed Australia, Singapore, and now calls Bali home. And he's had many different roles. He's been a founder, regional director, VP, managing director, chief growth officer, and CEO. So he's served in many senior board and advisory positions for startup and industry organizations during his time here in Bali. And you know what? He hasn't just founded one, he's founded 2 companies that are making big waves in sustainability and ESG. Thanks so much for coming here today.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, Friska. Yeah, absolute waves. I mean, that's a I hope I can justify that, but we can get into it. It's been a funny thing. It really has been just a very organic. Of course, I'm going to say.
Of course, you're going to say that.
But it's been a really natural process. We came to Bali, my wife and 3 children. We came to Bali wanting something different after both having long corporate careers and 17 years in Singapore, which we loved and are still very grateful for. But we wanted something different, but we didn't know what that was. And so coming to Bali, it was, let's take the foot off the gas for a little bit. Let's spend a bit more time with each other, which was amazing. But then also, let's have a bit of a look around and see what we can do to give back and sort of thank Bali for having us. And that's where it all started. And so, starting with, for me, I don't mind getting my hands dirty. I never have. I grew up on a farm. And trash in all of its many sort of factions is sort of, I guess, one of the bigger problems here.
Yep.
And it affects not only just local life, all the way through to tourists and tourism and the island. Bali generates over 50% of Indonesia's tourism revenue.
That's insane.
So that if tourism is affected here, then it not only hurts Bali majorly, which we saw in COVID, but it really affects Indonesia as a whole. So
it means if you're successful in making a small change here, the impact is exponential. So there's leverage. Yeah.
Hopefully. I mean, we just want to create environmentally sustainable businesses, but economically sustainable businesses. And I think that's a really important point. And as I went from beach cleanups and river cleanups, etc., on my, off my own back, and just to, try and kind of thank Bali and do my bit as a citizen, and I started to question where that waste was going. You pick up a lot of trash on the beach. There's a lot of plastic and styrofoams and all of its different, sort of the downstream effects of fossil fuels or downstream products. But there's also a lot of organic waste. And so I focused on the plastics first. It's a huge issue. The oceans are filled with it, not just here, globally. It's not just a Bali problem. It's not just an Indonesia problem. But when I went out there and started working with the plastics industry and the plastics recycling industry, I realized just how mature it was. There's so many great people, all the way from making machines to help process the plastic, through to designers and architects and product designers that are just doing some fantastic stuff with plastic. And for us, as a family and as a business, we're like, well, are we going to move the needle here? Or are we better off helping these people move the needle a bit more? And that's where BUMI started. So BUMI came about because there is some fantastic individuals working in the plastic industry. But my background predominantly is on the commercial or creative side, not the creative director. I need to make that very clear. But working to bring ideas to life. And so that's what ultimately BUMI was created for, to help these makers and help this existing industry do more with what they were doing. And then the journey has continued on into other areas.
Fabulous. And so, you mentioned when you first came to Bali, you did a bit of navel gazing, did a bit of soul searching, some beach cleaning. But what happened in particular to step from, okay, we've got BUMI now. BUMI, by the way, guys, means earth in Bahasa. And so how did this career shift then? Was it like permanent? You're like, this is my thing now. I'm leaving Ad behind. And how did BUMI then grow into Shiva?
Oh wow, that's actually a bigger question than you think. I left advertising when I left S4. I was resolute that I was not going back to advertising. I'd been in and around advertising for 20 years, and I'd had enough. And don't get me wrong, some of my just most favourite moments and people and highs and obviously lows came from those experiences, and I'm incredibly grateful. But I even messaged Smart and Sorrell when I left, saying, "Don't worry, I'm not leaving to go to a competitor or anything like that. I'm leaving the business." So I didn't come here to do advertising, and I knew that, but I didn't think I'd be doing what I'm doing, and so it was initially quite a slow, easy thing, and then it's a slippery slope. The deeper that you get into the issues around ESG in this part of the world, the more you see that needs to be done, and especially coming in with my background around entrepreneurship, around building businesses, around scaling businesses, around understanding complex problems or client problems and helping communicate those, simplify those and communicate those to a larger or broader audience. And I just saw an opportunity for me to do good with my skill set, and not to sell more toothpaste or sneakers.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a forever thing, but my wife will laugh when she sees this. But it's something that if I go after something, I really go after something. It's very hard for me to.
You're not a half-assed person.
No.
You're like in with both feet.
I wish I really was, So and it's risk, but it's calculated risk, I think, on my part.
Yeah. So, people with an advertising background, you've already said very gifted with storytelling, using words, imagery, visuals to melt hearts, to change minds, to ultimately lead to large-scale behavior change. And so when you're trying to introduce innovations to the market, like Shiva has done, this is a big, big challenge within all organizations. So can you share what the main challenges were and how you overcame them? Because it is the first of its kind, and anything that's the first, people are hesitant to be the first in case it fails. So how have you managed that?
Brute force, maybe. Look, the aerobic digestion, which is what Shiva Industries does, it's not new tech. It's been around for a very long time. In fact, it's been around forever, because aerobic digestion is effectively just a fancy way of saying, composting or it is nature's way of breaking down organic materials. Providing that those organic materials aren't stacked up and overloaded and all of the things that the world that we live in now with our sort of hyperconsumption leads to. So aerobic digestion has been around for a long time, but it wasn't in Indonesia. And so it started with BUMI. But when we would go and speak to clients, they were really happy to talk about using recycled materials and composite materials, etc. And whether that's construction-based waste or plastic waste, things like that, or how do they use water better, and how do I collect rainwater and then reuse grey water and recharge deep wells and all of those things that you should be doing if you're looking after your water and if you're using water properly. But what about organic waste was the question that would come up, especially when we were talking about F&B, the education sector, agricultural sector. What do we do with all of this organic waste? And so the question was there. The technology existed elsewhere, but not here. So it was a leap of faith to learn what we could and to connect with experts globally and assemble a team, find a space, and start working on prototyping. And so it was a bit of a leap of faith from our side, let alone our customers, to get started, to get the ball rolling. From then on, I think it moved incredibly quick. It was 3 months of deep R&D, finding the right people, finding the right team, early morning calls, late evening calls, global calls, begging, borrowing, stealing from wherever we possibly could to try and sort of get this prototype built and make it our own. And it's not just about building a piece of technology. There's the whole biological side with the microbes. And so finding the right expert in this part of the world, sourcing the microbes and testing the microbes, refining that cohort of microbes. And that there was almost these parallel processes going on. And then being able to replicate these scenarios to get to an optimal product that was, at least global standard, if not better. And really, I can't say if it's one or the other. I would like to think it's the latter, based on our testing and based on our third-party results. But also, the international digester businesses are incredibly smart, way bigger than us, and can move pretty quick sometimes. So we'll see.
Right. So, I mean, a lot of people describe the ESG situation as a crisis. And often the biggest opportunities come out of a crisis. It wasn't too long ago that companies with a footprint in Europe were super stressed about the GDPR regulation. And, we've had things like the 1989 ExxonMobil oil spill disaster, the fires at Muwung landfill here in Bali, and the cybersecurity hacks seeming to happen everywhere. The Indonesian government, Medibank, Optus, etc. And often it takes a crisis to kind of shake people out of their zombie-like state and put their head above the water. So what role do you think ESG has in achieving a company's future fit statements? Like, who do you look up to and think, you know what, they've really turned this crisis into an opportunity to level up, to innovate, to become better than they were before? Who comes to mind?
It's an interesting one. I think who does come to mind? I think if you're talking about the social governance side and who's really clued in to their audience, I think I'd have to say Patagonia. The millennials are the largest generation of our time by far, are really coming into their purchasing power.
Yeah.
And they simply won't frequent your establishment or purchase your product or talk about you on social media. In fact, they'll go to the extent of
boycotting you. Yeah.
Totally. And getting their friends to boycott. They are hyper-connected, a hyper-connected group. I think I'm actually a geriatric millennial, which I didn't want to say on camera, but now I am. So I'm past all of that. But there's not the question of do you need to be focused on ESG to be a future fit org. It's if you don't focus on ESG, you won't be an org. So I think that for me is something that when I speak to brands, and I've had a couple of conversations along the journey, and I won't mention any brand names, but some of them have been, no, we do our ESG reports because it's mandatory, or we actually don't care, and we're not really going to invest in that side of our business. And there's these really old dinosaur businesses, and then you see these young businesses coming through, the challenger brands, etc., that are absolutely putting ESG first. And one locally, which I think is one to call out, Potato Head. Right?
Ah, yes.
Potato Head is in the F&B scene, absolutely, and beyond. I think they're quite an integrated venue now. But they have just done an incredible job, and for years now have had the ESG up front and center. And I think what Simon and the rest of the team have done there is unreal, and absolutely the shining example of what should, would, could be done. So I think that my wife recently stayed there. She had a friend here in town from Singapore, and I was like, take photos of everything, I want to know. And, even in the rooms, all of these different touches of recycled plastic, because I think they're at now 98% waste-free or 99% waste-free. So they don't send anything to landfill.
Yeah.
They process it on site and use it on site.
Incredible, because businesses in that industry traditionally have very high rates of waste. And
huge.
And people, I also look up to Patagonia, and traditional companies often say, oh, it's easy for Patagonia because they started green. Like if we're a manufacturer, if we're a utilities organization, it's harder for us because we're traditional, and but it goes to show that it is possible if you put your mind into it and you're willing to invest the resources in it.
Oh, definitely. And there's a motorbike company that we work with, Savage, out of Melbourne, and they make the hottest e-motorbikes, and not, we're not talking about a little scooter that you zip around on. This thing is an absolute weapon, almost a track bike. And they approached us, and they wanted to. It's already an e-bike, so they were already leaning into that world. But it's a high performance, and it's not a cheap motorcycle. But they approached us and said, "How can we sort of work together?" So they didn't have to do that. They're already an e-bike. They're already going to capture hearts and minds, under the green banner. But they wanted to push it further. And so we're working with them under the BUMI banner, under the BUMI brand, on prototyping some of their parts. So their tank cover, which obviously isn't a petrol tank on their bike, the belly pan, and then the seat cowling. And so we're working with different types of composites with one of our partners here, R Plastics up in Ubud. But they didn't have to do that. But that's a great example of a company going, do you know what? Make it better.
Yep.
So let's do better.
Right.
How do we be better? And I think it doesn't matter which industry you're in. If your management team are sitting there going, how do we be better? Then you're going to see more people fall into line behind that. And I don't mean that in the control sense. We'll get behind that, maybe is a better way to put it. That kind of leadership than people who are just like bottom line.
Yeah.
Because that style of hyper capitalism, mega capitalism has had its day. And I think this current generation, this active generation, it is really realizing how damaging that has been for our environment. How much we've hurt the planet, how much we've hurt ourselves in that as well, and how unhappy both the planet and we as a species are.
Yeah.
So, and that's probably why I come back to Patagonia.
Yeah.
Because it's the antithesis of that model that they've gone and done.
Where was that motorcycle company from?
Melbourne.
Wow.
Melbourne.
Okay.
Yeah. Dennis Savage is the founder, and they have an unreal team.
Yep.
It will be on their website soon, because they have a customization tool on their website where you can choose different materials and different looks. And so we're prototyping at the moment here in Bali on a 1/3 scale.
Yep.
To keep materials down, but also to make it a bit faster and a bit cheaper to rapid prototype.
Yep.
With different materials, different colorways, etc.
Okay. So in the big mega transformational projects that I've been on, it's often, a strategy is set forward in global, and the local regions are expected to roll it out. And it's usually not very successful because they don't take the time to tailor to cultural traditions and perspectives and outlooks. So, given your experience in Australia, Singapore, and now here in Indonesia, what are those attitudinal differences when it comes to sustainability? And have you found that you've had to tailor your approach to account for these differences?
Yeah, I don't know what people hate more, spending money on advertising or spending money on sustainability. I've certainly not made it easy on myself. I think I've had to find my people here and find my tribe here the same way I did in advertising. Find that support network and then find people who are already on that journey that just need a little bit of a push. I think, there's a huge reason that with Shiva in particular, we have, the first machine that we built was 300 kilos a day. And that is your large restaurant. Through to, we can make a 50,000 kilo machine, but, the majority of the machines that we've either proposed or sold so far are between 300 and 2,000 kilos per day. And we've done that for a reason, because there's enough, going back to the tourism point, there's a lot of tourism here. There's a lot of fantastic F&B.
Yeah.
And the hospitality scene here in general is one of the best in the world. You can go and get fantastic accommodation, fantastic food, fantastic drinks in the most beautiful
Totally
scenarios.
agree. Yeah.
Right? You can have breakfast on a mountain. You can have lunch on a beach. So, you know, and then you can have dinner at what feels like New York, you know, and cocktails that are, you know, ridiculous. So that scene is pumping here. And so for us, we saw that as a real opportunity for a fast-moving industry that is, on the whole, looking to do good. We found a few bad apples, don't get me wrong, but on the whole, looking to do good instead of going after the government, let's say. And I'm not talking about the Indonesian government, any government. Because that, if you look in the strategy playbook, you're like, okay, where's the big money? Where can we, you know, sort of go and force ourselves in and give ourselves or go after larger deals? But to the question, it's we wanted to go to the people that were already on that journey that we could help move along versus the ones that are like don't really care or too busy or it's not a focus or there is no burning platform, I guess. And that's really the three types of clients that we meet. We, you know, ones that go, I have a major issue. This is the amount of food waste that I have, or organic waste, including garden waste, etc. And I've tried composting, or I've tried etc. Black soldier fly larvae, and feeding to animals, or SOS, so scholars of sustenance, or ragam, etc. And I've got too much, and I have to give to landfill. And there's the ones that go, I don't know. I mean, you know, we should probably do something with our organic waste, but I'm not really too sure. And then the other one's like, no, it's fine. My banjar totally takes it and separates it and does a really good job. Or the person that picks it up, not necessarily the banjar. They do a really sustainable thing with it. And they're the three types of people that we meet. And then generally that's where we sort of jump off, you know, our conversation, or we jump out of the opportunity if it's sort of, you know, fraught with danger and going to take us a really long time to explain how harmful organic waste is to the environment.
Right. And so, you know, you touched on it earlier, the importance of networks, the importance of relationship, knowing who your stakeholders are, and you often connect really diverse stakeholders from manufacturers to your commercial clients. So if a key to having ESG at its core requires fostering collaboration around diverse stakeholders, can you share a story about how you cultivated that, how you cultivated collaboration across different key players to achieve, you know, a significant positive outcome? So what can companies learn from this when they're trying to transform their operations too?
I think it's stakeholder alignment, you know, really in two words. And stakeholder alignment is and it goes back really to that sort of global approach that you talked about earlier, and that's that sort of centralized, decentralized, centralized, decentralized, and, you know, am I in control now, or is it global, or whatever? And there isn't an opportunity for stakeholder alignment, and there isn't an opportunity for you know, the be better mantra that I was talking about earlier, and for people to get in and behind that. And so stakeholder alignment is incredibly important, and there's the old adage of the fish rots from the head. And so I think that starts at an exec level, and as a sort of senior leadership team level, but then obviously then flows throughout the organisation, and communication of that is key. Accountability to that is key. And all the things that, you know, we would do going in and consulting with a business, and, you know, is, okay, this is our jump off point. You know, how do we then get to day one? How do we get to day 100? How do we get to day 1,000? So getting to day zero, I think, is a really interesting process. And that's where I think you can probably garner a lot of your stakeholder alignment in that bit there, is getting through that process of where does it really hurt for us? Where could it hurt in the future? And what are some of those really wild ideas of where, you know, we could be challenged in the future as a business? Or take those really giant sort of moonshot leaps above and beyond our competitors in regards to ESG strategies or executions, etc.
So you touched on, looking ahead, seeing what the opportunities or the challenges are. So what is next? What do you think the opportunities and challenges are, not just for the ESG industry, but for BUMI and Shiva? So what are your plans to stay ahead of the curve and make sure that your solutions maintain relevancy and impactful when the world is constantly changing?
I can't tell you our secrets. No, look, with BUMI's been interesting. So I think with BUMI, we've very much evolved into that product space. And so whether that is work with the likes of Savage or whether that is working with surf brands locally, or even, so there's a crossover with BUMI and Shiva happening. It's around how do we take waste out of the ecosystem and turn it in and give it a forever home.
Yeah.
So that's very much where BUMI is focused.
Yeah.
And working with partners like Altarise Materials, who they create basically Portland cement replacements using construction waste, etc., and natural materials for interior design. And they do floor, walls, ceiling. Unreal company, Altarise Materials, check them out for sure. So the BUMI is very much focused on working with businesses like that and helping those sorts of products take more waste out of the world and put it into and turn it into something that's of value and gives it a forever home. I think with Shiva, the focus really is on it has to be on education. So
starting at the school level?
No, I wish. No, I think that's something that we will evolve to. We're still a startup, and our factory is awesome, but we're not ready to get busloads of students through yet. Also, I don't think it's that safe because there's welders and grinders and all that sort of jazz.
It's just another regular day in Bali, though. There's construction everywhere.
To be honest, you're right. You're not wrong. No, look, I think it's educating the main waste producers about the harmful effects of organic waste when left idle in the current system that we have. So about 97% of organic waste ends up in landfills.
Yep.
And those can be illegal landfills as well as legal. I would love to say that it all goes into the legal system, but it really doesn't. And it doesn't take long to jump on a motorbike anywhere across Southeast Asia and see illegal dumps. So 96% of that waste, 97% of that waste goes into these landfills. Now, as I said earlier, if you live in the jungle and you throw a banana peel on the ground, microbes are going to do its thing. It's fine. Yeah. It's when you put 100 banana peels or 1,000 or a million that you start to have a problem. And we've seen that with Suwon, with it being on fire. So what happens with organic waste? I'll try and do the quick version. But ultimately, organic waste is as soon as it enters an anaerobic state, which means without oxygen, it starts to produce methane. Now, methane is 86 times worse for the environment than carbon.
Yep.
So it's bad.
Yep.
Methane is also incredibly flammable. Bad. Especially when combined with one of the world's best fuels, plastic. And that's what we're seeing with these landfills on fire all over Indonesia. It's having an incredibly toxic, we've got methane, which is already toxic, terrible for the environment, should not be released. And then you have the fires. So that's burning all the rest of the stuff that's in there. That makes soil waste horrible. But then it rains and you think, wow, fires are out, it's awesome. Bad. So
because it's acid rain or?
No, just normal rain. The organic waste, when left in an anaerobic state, or even actually just in an aerobic state, which was with oxygen, is incredibly acidic.
Yeah, okay.
So our machines have to be made of super high quality stainless steel. Otherwise, they would rust to the ground in 2 months. So super acidic. So you imagine this huge pile of rain comes in, a really acidic liquid stripping everything else that's in there. So the labels, the batteries, the nappies, all of the other crap that's in there, right? And then that goes into where? Into the soil, into the mycelium network, but also then into the groundwater.
Yeah.
So it is super toxic, super bad for both the air, the soil, and the air.
Yeah.
So, and with Bali, you're looking at the toxic smoke and all of the tourist dramas that happen because of the fires, but also the people that live on Seoul. It's 5,000 people that live on that landfill. I mean, horror show. Then, so air quality. Then you're looking at soil quality and the ability to be able to grow healthy crops and healthy food and non-toxic food. But then you're also looking at the water side of things. And so Uluwatu at the moment, you're already trucking water in. So if we just zoom in on tourism, the mismanagement of organic waste is not going to have an effect on tourism in the future, is having an effect on tourism right now.
Right.
Okay. We are having fires, smoke. Nobody wants to be around burning landfill. We've got tourist levies on waste. And so we're now asking foreigners to pay more, which they don't have to do in other countries.
Yeah.
Because we have a waste problem. We've got tourist restrictions on water, which we had last year in October when the rainy season was late, which we didn't really have a rainy season. So once again, that methane, worse for the environment. So we're talking about climate change as well. And then groundwater issues, about having toxic groundwater and water not being available in some areas where it used to. And there are about 6 different points in Bali now that are under we're having major water emergencies. If you could choose to go to a beach somewhere that you don't have to pay levies, you're not breathing in smoke, you're not restricted to 1 shower a day, and you know the food is super fresh, and healthy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then what would you choose?
Yeah.
So, and we're not talking about a small amount of organic waste here. We're talking about 72%.
Mountains and mountains. Yeah.
72% of waste in Bali is organic. It's over 1 million tons a year. So, fun fact, it's plastic where everybody is focused and doing a fantastic work, and don't get me wrong, it needs to be done and it's built up over time, and I get that, is 14% of the waste flow. So where do we need to be looking? Like, where do we need to be doing things? And so that's, for me, when sort of, I guess, that journey from beach cleanup to Shiva, through BUMI and to Shiva, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. Is this is a major problem, not potentially now.
Wow.
And I love Bali, have loved Bali for a really long time. We have been coming to Bali forever. Typical Australian, I know. But, you know, I want to try and help Bali and Indonesia and Southeast Asia deal with this sort of sleeping giant. I guess it's sleeping in most people's minds. And that's where the education piece comes in. So we'll talk to anybody who'll listen. So, but I have spent some time in Jakarta. And I think the government is absolutely really excited about technology being able to help it. But it's going to need a really integrated approach to put a dent in it. And if we look at Indonesia-wide, it's about 40 million tonnes a year and growing.
So looking outside of Indonesia, just generally, what are your thoughts on the key trends, ESG trends, that companies need to know to become future fit, and how can they proactively integrate or respond to these trends into their strategic planning process?
Huge question, because it's very different by vertical and by market and by business stage.
Yeah.
And I think the simplified version is, are we giving back more than we're taking?
Yep.
And I think and that, pardon me, that's going to be great for blooper reel. So I think that, the simple thing is, are we giving back more than we're taking? And that's a very simple scale.
Yeah. Have that as your core principle. Yeah.
That's where you start.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fabulous.
And that is environmentally, but also socially. So I think, are we really truly looking after our people, or are we burning them out and spitting them out the grinder? You know? And are we doing the same with our supply chain? Or are we doing the same with our venues or our corporate offices or whatever, wherever? And this is where I say it's difficult, because some people have a factory, some people have a workshop, some people have a corporate office, etc. So it's too broad to answer properly. But simply, are we giving back more than we're taking?
Love it. So at the end of each episode, I like to ask my guests some wild card questions. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Future fit leadership to me is?
Future fit leadership to me is a leader that the kids or the next generation would be proud of. That is really considering the legacy of their actions and their behaviour, and that can be obviously environmental, but social as well. So future fit leadership for me cares holistically around their impact and understands how much impact they do have. And the execs and leadership sometimes don't get that, especially new leaders. They don't realise the ripple effect, the butterfly effect of their actions and behaviours. And don't get me wrong, everybody has crappy days. You know, that's okay. But building the trust and the having the right intent will get the support of the people around you when you do have those bad days. And nobody gets it 100% right. But if you have kids or it's, you know, it doesn't really matter. But for me, being somebody that and creating businesses and working in a way and behaving in a way that would make my kids proud now and into the future is something that drives me. And I think that would create more future fit.
Great answer. Leaders. Yeah. And
tough question. Okay, I'm ready.
We need more of this in the future.
Love.
Yep.
Love.
Yep. I've experienced, like, you know, both you and I, we've traveled quite a few places around the world, and, you know, people are very warm and friendly and engaging here. It's not always the same reception elsewhere. Often the knee-jerk response is annoyance or frustration or lack of understanding. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's. I had this conversation yesterday. Bali in particular is a really magical place for this, where you can. I was invited to a ceremony yesterday afternoon, which, you know, number one, how it was an incredible opportunity.
What a privilege,
and
yeah.
a very, super big privilege. But I was invited into the home and taken through all the motions, and my bahasa is super limited, as you know, but was able to use some, and I was welcomed in as one of the family, and it wasn't an average ceremony. It was part of the Naban ceremony, so it's pretty serious, but that doesn't happen elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so Bali is pretty magical for that. But I think with Trihita Karana in Bali and Hinduism, the balance between the gods, each other, and the environment. And I think love across those three pillars. If we had more of that, it doesn't matter which gods you believe in, or if you don't. But more love towards the spiritual side, I think would be really beneficial for the planet and for humanity if we are to continue existing as a species. More love for each other, absolutely, and more love for the environment, absolutely. So yes, love.
I love that you chose that because,
pun intended.
Pun intended. Well, in the English language, there is only one word, it's love. But in the Chinese language, for example, there's different types of love. There's friendship love, there's brotherly sister love, and we need all the types we can get.
Totally. I think it's the world would be a much, much, much better place.
So, one final question.
Go for it.
A future fit organization is one that
I think is one that is continuously striving to be better. And that sounds super old school, and I don't mean it that way. Better in the sense of what we've been talking about. And if we go to Trihita Karana, I think a better part of the community, better for its people, better for the environment. But then also, I think, if we look at the gods and spiritual side and God, I don't know how I'm going to sort of pull this in, but I'm going to try. Okay, this is going to be maybe a world first, but I think maybe it comes down to that better strategy and leadership, and really investing in its top talent. And making sure that they are really prepared for the roles that they're in, because they are really tough roles. I've sat on those board tables. They are tough roles. And I don't think I was fully prepared when I first started sort of entering the C-suite for the role, the job, and the impact that my behaviour and or executions and things like that could behaviour and actions could have. So future fit organisations are not just profit driven. Being an economically sustainable and successful company is incredibly important, and I started with saying that that's one of my goals, right? But we're number one, we're an environmentally sustainable business. But that's okay. That's our field. It's not for everybody. But I think being economically stable, but also is one thing. And being economically successful is one thing. Commercially successful. Absolutely pillaging your entire supply chain, talent pool, and or natural resources, et cetera. Pick any of the the 100 things. That's not economically or commercially sustainable. That's just fucked up. So being the opposite of that, I think we're coming to more balanced. I think we're understanding more about being balanced businesses and future fit businesses that do balance that. But yeah, I think there's got to be a line that we draw. We go, okay, well, we are doing well enough to invest in our people, to make sure our supply chain is environmentally friendly and sustainable, et cetera. And they're looking after their people and all of this sort of jazz. Make sure we are, we can go home and sleep at night as good individuals, but also the company as a whole could be considered a beneficial or a positive contributor to society. And once again, nobody or no company is perfect, and perfection is obviously an illusion anyway. But the ones that are trying are the ones that will succeed. And once again, we go back to the millennials, and they'll find out. You put anything on Reddit, and it's solved in 5 minutes. I mean, they're incredibly talented as a group and resourceful. So yeah, you're either in that camp or you're not. And I think we've already seen businesses go by the wayside because of it, and we've already seen businesses become incredibly successful because of their being good citizens, being corporate citizens. So a future fit organisation is good for the planet, is good for the species, and it pleases the gods, whatever gods that you believe in.
And it sounds like they do a lot more giving than taking as well.
Absolutely. Give more than you take. That's absolutely key.
Toby, thanks for joining me today on the Future Fit podcast.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And where's the best place people can go to if they want to find more information about yourself, BUMI or Shiva?
So, LinkedIn, Tobias Wilson, Instagram, shivaindustries.id.
You are a geriatric millennial.
I am. I didn't say Facebook. I'm rude. And our website is shivaindustries.tech.
Fabulous. And I know you brought a sample, so can you show us what and explain to us what that's about?
I can.
Yeah.
Now I know this is so bad. It's in plastic. Any natural, 100% compostable packaging brands, please reach out to us. So this is. Here we go. To get the close up. So this is some of our digestate. So it feels just like dirt. It basically is. It's just full of carbon, microbes, and nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and the industry would call that NPK. So that's how most fertilizers are gauged. Our machines create this product. It comes out at about 10% moisture in 24 hours. And so that's any organic waste. So for the right size machine, you can put an entire, I'm sorry for the vegan and vegetarians, or just, you can put an entire cow in this machine and hoof to horns, and it will become this in 24 hours. So it works with coconut shell, bamboo hulls, everything, coconut hulls, shell, you name it. The only thing that the machine and the microbes don't like, and which is fair enough, is oyster shells, because they're basically a metal, they're all zinc. So that's the only thing when we're working with our customers, we ask them to take it out. It won't hurt the machine, but it'll just be left in the machine, so they'll have to take them out at some stage. But yes, anything. So when we, for the partners and the brands that we work with, all of their food waste and garden waste, etc., goes into the machine. When it's full, off it goes. They set it off, and 24 hours later, a really high nutrient dense organic fertilizer, and it's not a compost.
Okay.
So we've had it third party tested, and don't get me wrong, composting is awesome, and it's best used combined with a compost. But composting is very different. It takes about 120 days usually, and the mineral content and composition is a lot lower than what we have. And that's not saying we're the best. We're kind of here, composting here, but then you have yours, super fertilizers and synthetics, but it's a huge trade-off because you're talking about really toxic material and stuff like that. So this is all for you. Use it sparingly, about 10% mix between soil and...
Oh, I won't do it. My gardener will do it.
Make sure they know, because if they put too much on it, the nitrogen will burn the plants, and it's not good. And we've done loads and loads and loads of testing.
Yeah.
So really, it is a 10% mix over the top.
Got it.
And you can do that sort of once a month or something, and your plants will go mental.
So Toby, I'm intrigued. I haven't come across a company like Shiva before. Tell me what happens. Like a client drops in your inbox and says, "Hey, I want to talk about ABC." What does the partnership approach look like with your organization?
Yeah, good question. I wish they were just dropping into the inbox, just sliding into my DM.
Oh, that's not how it rolls?
No. Does any company have that all the time? No, look, I think the first thing we do is obviously make sure that they understand, I guess, the basics of what we do and how we do things, so there's no misconceptions or whatever, and to make sure that we're a fit for them. Being a small business, we can't be running around chasing everything because not everyone is right, and we have limited time. So once we've gotten through that, then we'll go out and visit them and check out what they're doing with their waste, and find out volume and things like that, their waste flow, waste types, and things. So, and also, I mean, it's really important. So the number one thing that people should be doing with their food waste in particular is we go through sort of the hierarchy of needs. So it's, can we give it to humans? Okay, so Ragam, Scholars of Sustenance, etc., fantastic organizations that are helping really feed the people that need it. Okay, and every kitchen wastes good food. Okay, it's not bad. Kitchens, we're not having to go at you. It's okay. It's part of it. But so there's a difference between food waste and food loss. So food loss is once the food hits the venue, 20% is lost before it gets to the plate.
Because like it spoils, or what do you mean by lost?
An apprentice trips over and drops a big tray of food. It spoils. Improper inventory management, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Any number of things. So about 20% of that food that at a hospitality, at a kitchen buys, is wasted food loss. The rest of it is food waste, and so that's from the plate onwards. Now, there's a lot of that food loss, or at least what goes that's been prepped, it's been ready to be served but hasn't gone out. Buffets are obviously a big source of this, but that can be used and given to help feed people. So number one, is the customer has the customer assessed if they can give food to humans? Okay, that's the number one thing. We do not want it to touch our machines if it's good enough for humans. Number two, animals. So can we give this food to pigs, chickens, et cetera, to animals? Okay, so once we've checked on those two areas, the rest of it, absolutely, please put as much of it as you can through our machines. We're super happy. But I don't think a lot of people, and they've just changed the regulation in Singapore recently, in and around the hawker centres, to help them give more food to humans. And you see Singapore and you think, why are they encouraging giving food to the needy? It's a really successful place, city state, and beautiful. It's clean, and everybody's got everything, right? Not true. And especially in other parts of Southeast Asia, people are starving. So the more that we can do to get more food to these people, or create a product that grows better food faster and increases yield, then that's something that we want to get behind. So once we have that, then we look at the volume that's left over, and then our machines can handle from 300 kilos per day up to 50,000 kilos per day. And with that, we get in 24 hours, we get an 80 to 90% waste reduction. So if they put 1,000 kilos into a machine, we get about 200 kilos of fertilizer the next day, 100 to 200 kilos of fertilizer the next day.
Yeah.
So it has a huge impact already on reducing that volume in an incredibly short amount of time, but then also producing a really high value product that they can use either with their suppliers and providing their organic farmers, or giving to local communities, et cetera, or in their own grounds. A lot of our customers are growing their own fruit, vegetables, et cetera, on the grounds. And I think when customers see that, especially with the hotels, when they're going, okay, well, look at that herb garden that's used in my meal. It's as fresh as it can be. Look at. I mean, if I look at the Padma in Legian, right? I mean, they've got ducks, chickens, geese. They've got their own little mushroom hut where they're growing their own mushrooms and stuff. It's phenomenal what they're doing down there. So, and I think when customers see that, I think going back to the previous question about being a future fit brand in hospo, if you're a future fit brand, you're growing some of your own food on site. And I think what Usbaka has done down in Fed Square recently is, I think what Us does and his team, what they do is unreal in showing how you can go full circle. The more of that, and I know that that Us is doing something in Bali soon. I can't say what it is because it's not my place to tell. I think more of that, more of that circular economy, more of that circularity, more of that sort of really questioning who, what, where, why, how. It's how did this cookie get to me? What were the ingredients? Is it good for me? Is it not? But especially when it comes to hospitality, how do you create an experience around that? And I go back to Potato Head. They've created, I mean, when you can't miss it, you walk into Potato Head and there is their plastic recycling facility. And you look anywhere and it's in their signage. It's in the water bottle caps. They've done like everywhere. You can tell that every single shred of plastic is being reused and they've spent a ton of time and effort and obviously money in reducing the overall amount of waste per person per night. And I'm going to get this wrong and I'm sorry, Simon and team, but I think it was 2.8 kilos per person per night of waste. And which is industry standard, and it's now down to 1.2 or something like that. So reducing, then reusing and recycling. I think they're doing a fantastic job, but they're doing a fantastic job of creating an experience around it. Because if you walk into that courtyard in between the hotel and the beach club, the statues and things like that, I mean, they create experiences using ESG as the sort of the fuel for those experiences, and that's the magic. That's where real success comes from. And doing it is one thing, but I think having people experience what good should look like, should be, and great should look like and be, is so important. Otherwise people just won't know. People are just so focused on their life and their day to day and their own stresses that they can gloss over it, right? and they'll take the convenience over the more sustainable solution every day of the week. We've proven that for the last 100 years with the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah. Brilliant. Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me.
No
it's
worries.
been an absolute pleasure. Enjoy the fertilizer, and I look forward to seeing what your gardener grows.
Well, that's a wrap on Future Fit today, and
Awesome.
debating our Future Fit organizations, sustainable organizations. I think the unequivocal answer to that is yes. It's just a matter of how organizations can do that.
Yep, absolutely.
So I want to finish off with this one quote, right? The best thing about the past is learning what to take with us into the future. So if you've been inspired today by Toby's story, I want you to think about what you're going to take with you. What mindsets are you going to take? What beliefs, what behaviors, what people maybe, and what resources, and how are you going to shape that into a future that's future fit? Thanks for having me today. Thanks for joining us today. You've been with Future Fit with Friska.